and foremost, I want to thank you, NIPCA, for inviting us down to participate at today's event. We're really excited to be here today from Illumiti, and I'm just speaking on behalf of the rest of the team that's here. We have really been looking for more opportunities to really be able to not only assist, but give back within the community and really help and let people be aware of all the resources available to them to help them guide them on their job journeys and where they want to take themselves into the future. So thank you once again for inviting us today to be able to take this great opportunity to speak to the rest of your group. And I hope everyone leaves today with something valuable. And if we don't get to cover something that you really did want covered today, please let us know. We're really, really friendly, nice people. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you have a question, we are happy to assist and help out. But with that being said, I did want to start off with a bit of an icebreaker before we dive into everything. So whether you're on your laptop or you want to do this on your phone, if you go to menti.com and type in the code currently visible on the screen, you'll be able to participate in this little interactive activity. Now, before we get started, I should probably tell you guys a little bit about me. My name is Rihanna Thompson. I am an Associate Marketing Manager with Illumiti. I actually recently celebrated my 4th year anniversary with Illumiti. I joined the team straight out of graduating from U of T, and I was born and raised in the 6th, so I'm Toronto born and raised, and I am a gigantic Raptors fan. So I was a little bit disheartened by our early exit this year, but I'm slowly but surely getting over that. Like my title says, I'm in marketing. I live and breathe marketing. It's my passion, and it's one of the things that I have grown to acquire more and more skills in. And if anyone on the stream today wants to talk more about marketing besides consulting and SAP, feel free to connect to me later on LinkedIn, and I'd be happily able to discuss that with you there. As mentioned today, we have a few other members of our team joining us. We have a lot of expert, talented individuals, including Obei, who is an SAP FICO consultant, Tolu, who's an SAP PP and QM consultant, and Francis, who is our Director of HR. All of them are incredibly talented and incredibly intelligent and have a ton of experience and skills that they'll be able to share with you throughout today's presentation. So I hope you guys are able to ask as many questions as possible from them, and they're all very lovely and are here to assist. So with that being said, let's get on to a few of our questions, and we already got a few submissions. So how are you guys feeling today? So right now, we're sitting at an average 7.5. We got no nervous people in the room, which I think is great, because let's be honest, we are here to not only have fun and to be able to share some of our experiences, skills, and thoughts, but we also really want to just be able to share in our resources and things like that. So I'm glad no one's really nervous. We're really, really nice people. There's nothing to be nervous about. So next one up is, what do you do for fun? So I'm sure you guys have a lot of other things you want to be doing at 8:15 in the evening. So if you weren't here today with us, what would you be doing?
Rihanna, I see video games, which is something that you like to do.
Yes, you can tell by my very nice gaming chair that I do enjoy video games. It looks like we got tons of people who are also interested in video games. That's good to hear. So everyone's probably excited about the new consoles coming out. We got a lot of people who are interested, who love playing, who are interested in music. For a few other things, we'll have to have a few of the people who are others share what are the other things that they're interested in. But this is great to see. Okay. Next question is, if you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be? Slow to load, or do we have no people? Ah, there we go. So some people want to be super fast, mind reading, super strength, light, travel without transcript, super strength, reading minds. So a lot of people want to read minds. I don't know if that is funny. I don't know if that's really a skill I want. I don't know if I really want to be in other people's heads. I have enough going on in my own head to be overcomplicated, but to each their own. To be in this.
Print money.
Yeah. Oh, print money. Well, how do you know it's going to be valid, though, if you're printing money? Like, it could still be, you could be printing Monopoly money and you'd still have the skill.
You still have to spend it.
Yeah. Oh, we have a super dad. Aw, that's nice. See the future, change the past, be super cool. That's something to strive for. Our next question is, so this is a big important one. I want to make sure that we're able to make this presentation as valuable as possible to everyone out here. So let us know, what is one question you would like answered from today's event? We're going to be covering a variety of different topics. So let me know some questions you really want to know about so that I can make note of them to make sure to ask some of our speakers a little bit about them. Job opportunities, job strategy, we're definitely covering that. How to keep my job, yeah. Crushing behavioral interviews, okay. How do I continually grow in my career? The impact of COVID. That is an interesting thing that we should probably cover, because unfortunately COVID may be with us for a little bit longer than we'd all would have hoped. Do you recruit and train? Understanding the Canadian job market. Transmission from one job to another. Navigating the need for Canadian experience by employers. How to make the ATS. Where's the job market going? How does someone without SAP experience start a career in SAP? We're definitely covering that topic. How to break into the job market as a new immigrant. We have two fabulous speakers that can speak to their experiences with that. Getting a job in Canada for Nigerians living in Nigeria, yeah. How to get the C-level jobs. Okay. Well, thank you guys for engaging with us. I will make sure to see if we can cover quite a few of these questions will be covered throughout the presentation. So I'll definitely make sure to note some of these steps to make sure that our speakers take note and do cover them. Okay, that's the end of the interactive portion, or at least the game interaction portion of this presentation. Throughout this presentation, we're going to be covering a variety of topics, and I know you guys may have questions or things you'd like us to elaborate on throughout the presentation. We have transition slides in between each speaker, so we'll use those moments to cover any quick questions that anyone has. But also remember, we do have our Q&A at the end of the presentation, and we'll be here for at least, I'll say, 30 minutes answering questions from all of you. So if you want to save your question till later, you can also do that. With that being said, I do want to give you guys a bit of a rundown of what we'll be covering today. So we'll do some short introductions from each of our speakers. We'll also cover Illumiti culture, our firm's culture and values, and how that relates to especially people considering entering the job market. Consulting in SAP, the skills you'll need to know and how to acquire them. Prepping for success in Canada, resumes, interviews, and LinkedIn's and recruiters. Then we'll jump into our Q&A session, and then we'll end off with a quick conclusion. If there's anything we missed, we'll try to cover it during that time period. without a further ado, I will transfer it over to Frances to speak a little bit about herself. Frances, please take over.
So thank you so much for inviting me today. My name is Frances Song, and I'm, like you, came to Canada from somewhere else. I'm originally from South Africa. I came here in 1986 as a student to attend Queen's University. After completing my degree, there weren't jobs at the time. And so I went to Japan and worked there for 4 years. And then on my return, I started in HR. It just kind of happened through an old networking individual that I've worked with while I was at university. So remember, networking, someone in the past. I have about 20 years of experience in HR and recruiting. And I initially started my career as a recruiter, working as a headhunter. Spent time in the United States working as what they call an HR business partner. And since then, now I work with Illumiti for the last 5 years. It's the first Canadian company I've ever worked for, and it's the first time I've actually worked in headquarters. And this summer, what I did is, because of COVID, I decided to drive across the country, 9,000 kilometers with my dog, Charlie. As you can see, he was there. And so we traveled from Toronto to Vancouver and back. So it was a great experience. So I'm looking forward to today.
Next up, Tolu.
Hi everyone, my name is Tolu Akoni. I'm a SAP PPQM consultant with Illumiti. Just like many of you on this call, I grew up in Lagos, and I started off with my degree in electrical and electronics engineering. But as my career path has added, I've never really held or done anything core in electrical engineering. Straight out of school, I was fortunate at my NYSC phase to get a few offers to work in oil and gas and consulting. Eventually, I ended up working in oil and gas just because the financial prospects there seemed a bit more interesting. And then somewhere along the line, I was opportune to work for a company that sent me to do some work in Paris for a couple of months. And that was where I got my first international work experience. And, you know, like just having that level of exposure, seeing a different side of life kind of just shaped my journey from that point onwards. Eventually, after that experience in Paris, I did go back to Lagos, and I was able to pivot my experience in oil and gas to work for a consulting firm. I worked for Accenture. And then I was at Accenture for a few years, and that was where I got into SAP. And I'll talk a bit more about that journey later on in the course of this presentation. But then I came to Canada in 2014 as a graduate student. I came to get a degree in engineering and management just because I was trying to mirror my technical background with a bit of management experience. And I was very, very lucky that like the moment I got into Canada, I just started applying for jobs. And I remember in my first month in Canada, I applied for over 100 jobs, and I only got one interview call, and that was from Deloitte. So I was lucky enough to get a job within my first 2 months in being in Canada, and I just had to finish my degree program so I could just start the following year. So yeah, like I joined Illumiti in 2018, and it's been a fantastic experience, fantastic company to work for, and fantastic colleagues. And other than the 9-to-5 life, I really enjoy traveling, and I'm very passionate about the arts, and I express that through my photography. And for a fun fact about myself, I included a photo of me waking up one morning on Sahara Desert in Morocco after spending the night out there camping. So travel is one thing I really enjoy, and it gives me a lot of joy. So that's a brief intro. I'll share more about myself in the next couple of minutes. I'll hand over to Obey from here.
You're up next, Obey, and I put down insert name because you still need to tell us what is the name that has 26 letters that you can pronounce. Obey.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us speak today. My name is Obehia Kodu. I am an FICO consultant with Illumiti. I've worked with Illumiti since 2019. I grew up in Lagos and I spent part of my youth in the UK as well. So I think I'm what I call a global immigrant. I've lived also in the US for a bit, but it's more through, I guess, opportunity as opposed to a thought out plan, which I think is really reminiscent of the world we live in today. I worked in London for about 12 years, straight after school. I started my first proper job as a SAP end user. So I sat at the other end, being a business person, not understanding SAP, but just knowing that it would just help me do my job. And then from that, through experience, which I'll talk about later on, I transitioned to be a SAP FI consultant. I gained cross-modular experience. So what that means is in SAP in itself is a lot of you probably know, is quite wide. There's a lot of competencies within SAP. And in those competencies, there are also different modules that people work with. And I was fortunate through the course of my career to have exposure to different modules and to different degrees. I think that lends itself to some of what we'll be talking about today. I moved to Canada in 2010, which I always tell myself was yesterday, but when I do the math, it is not. I was fortunate when I moved. I got the job. I enjoyed it. It's still very much SAP, and then I transitioned to work for Illumiti, which, as Tolu said, is a lovely company to work for, full of diverse people with diverse experience and highly intelligent and very forward-looking. So I'm happy to be here today, and I hope I can add value to our conversation. Fun fact, I live a very boring life, so I don't have very much things that I like doing. I love people watching. But when I was younger, I had an uncle that would, each time he came, he would give me a word and he would say it, you know, the long Nigerian word, and he would want me to spell it. So I don't know, Rihanna, do you have the name? Shall I say it?
Yes, say it. I don't have the name here.
So the name is Ovie Manohor Norialohua. So,
I'm not going to even attempt to repeat it. So great job.
So it's an Isha name, which is from Edo State. For those of you that I'm sure a lot of people know where it is, it's in the southern Nigeria, and it means the little pounded yam, the little soft pounded yam that spoilt the mortar. With it's one word, but this uncle, when I was 7, I learned this word, so it stayed with me. When I had this fun fact, I was like, oh, what can I was like, hey, this word might mean something. So, and what it means is, at least the way I understand it is, you know, a little thing overlooked can have a big impact. Or a rotten apple could spoil a whole barrel. So I guess part of what we're talking about today is, you know, in as much as we're talking about the bigger things, how you can find your way through this interesting world and get opportunities, is let's not ignore the little things and the little strengths that we have that add to the bigger story. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Awesome. So in summary, I do want to say we have 3 amazing speakers here today that are going to share with you some different perspectives about the Canadian job market from different points of view. Francis will be speaking forward from the human resources and recruiting perspective of like the things you can do for yourself, preparing yourself to enter into the job market, while Tolu and Obey come from two different avenues for entering in the job market. Obey from the SAP user experience, getting her skills and experiences through that avenue, and then eventually adding on additional skills and experience through SAP courses in that way. And Tolu through the, I would say, the more traditional way of doing it, which is the SAP consultant route. Immediately getting into the role as consultant, getting your experience through a variety of different projects and taking up the opportunities as they come. But as we get into discussing some of those different aspects, one of the things I just want to reiterate to you guys as you begin to hear from some of our speakers is it's not only just about you matching yourself to a role or getting the experience and skills when you're trying to find a new job. I always tell like my mentees that you also need to make sure that the job fits you. It's not just you interviewing for the role. You need to find the right place that you want to grow and develop your career, and that is really going to provide you with the opportunities and resources to flourish in that role. So in order to do that, you really need to understand the culture and values of those organizations that you will be applying into. So right now, I'm going to transition it over to Francis, who's going to speak to some of the culture and values that are important to us here at Illumiti and why it matters to us that we find candidates that fit those types of ideals, because we know if we do, they'll flourish in those roles and it'll be a successful opportunity not only for us as the employer, but for them as the candidate. So with that being said, I will pass it over to you, Francis.
Okay, thanks so much. So we have 5 values within the organization, which are listed over here. And I'm not going to explain what each of the values mean, because the next slide will actually go into details and you'll see overlap between the values that are shown here. But why we have these values is what we actually realized throughout, we do employee engagement surveys, is that employees were telling us what the company values were and what was important in order to succeed. And from that, this is actually how our values came about. So we didn't actually push them down. What happened is all of this came from that data that we received. So if you go to the next slide, when we then delve a little deeper in terms of our culture, because obviously values and culture are intertwined, this is really how we perceive the importance of these items and for you to be successful within the organization. So what came across in our engagement surveys is that overwhelmingly our employees respect and trust one another. They actually like each other. They like working together. And so what happens is that means that they enjoy and they like working from a customer perspective as well as partnerships. And that leads directly into teamwork. We only succeed if we work as a team and we have clarity of purpose. We are helpful to our clients as well as helpful to one another. And we are very big on no finger pointing. So what we mean is if we make a mistake, it's okay to make a mistake. Admit it, we can all help each other. If we don't escalate something, then we're not going to learn and we're not going to be able to fix that particular problem. We do, because people are our business, we really do prioritize employee care as well as the development. So we do a lot of pulse surveys. We try and figure out how employees are doing. And as well as we really do strive for excellence and learning. We try and learn through our successes as well as our failures. So if we haven't done well on a project, we do our due diligence and say, okay, where did we go wrong? Our communication style as well tends to be direct and honest. And we do believe in humility. So one of the things our head of sales has always said, he always believes in being humble. We actually try, when we're looking to hire individuals, we look for that humility in individuals. one of the other items that I think is very important is care for the community. And this comes directly from our CEO himself. He really believes that we should be involved in various community affairs. And if we do something here in Canada, we need to do it for our employees in the United States as well. And finally, let's just roll up our sleeves and get the job done. No matter what happens, we all work together, we're a team, and let's help each other out. So that's really from a culture, and you can see how that ties into all of those values all together. And then also this flows into, in terms of how we approach the market. If you go to the next slide, Rihanna. So because we're a small company in this huge behemoth of SAP, we looked at our values as well as our culture and how do we approach the market. And so what differentiates ourselves. And so we approach the market in the fact that we try and do things smarter, faster, and leaner. And we have these templated solutions in our specialties where we are in terms of our, what we're good at. We tend to be more lean business focused approach because we understand that SAP can be very expensive to implement. So how can we do it better and do it that it actually is cost effective for our client? And we build these templates based on our industry background and expertise. The last one is that many of our clients are not aware that this is a major factor in what we do, is we are a team that commits to our clients in terms of doing what's right. So what do we mean? Is if we don't deliver on our promise to the client, we actually do pay the client back, which does mean that sometimes it does affect all of us in terms of our bonuses at the end of the year. So you can see how this all then ties in to our culture and our values. So when you're looking for a job and when you're approaching your companies, etc., look at their culture, look at what they say their values are, because they tie that in terms of their end of year reviews, their performance reviews, etc. All of this is taken into account. So I just wanted to give you that information. So thanks, guys.
Awesome. Another helpful tip, if you really go through any organization you're applying to, core values and what they emulate and demonstrate as an organization, it always helps to actually mention them in an interview or mention them in your cover letter, and just show that extra effort that you have made for yourself. Will show that extra effort to the hiring manager, that you've taken the opportunity to really say, I'm interested in working for you in the future. I'm interested in joining your team, joining your family. And this is the reason why, because of the way you exemplify these specific values and why they tie into me. And don't bullshit it though. If they don't go after that company. But if they do, definitely speak to them, because the more earnest and honest you are with that, the more passionate you'll speak to, the more passionately you'll speak of yourself on that interview or in that cover letter when you're communicating that to the hiring manager.
I just wanted to add another thing as well, is that these slides with regards to our culture, our values, and our approach, when we do orientation with new hires, our CEO actually does this presentation himself in person. So I think it's important to understand the importance of with internally, and regardless of whether it's our organization versus another organization, most of their recruiting website or career websites will actually put this information in terms of what is important. So use it in your approach to looking for a role, that their culture and their values are important.
Yeah, it's just another way to stand out from the pack. And speaking of standing out from the pack, the next thing we're really going to talk about is what are those soft and technical skills, especially if what you are pursuing is a career in consulting or even in a type of software like SAP. If that's where the route you want to take, there are definitely some soft and technical skills that you should acquire and understand in order to better prepare yourself for exploring those job opportunities. But prior to going into those specific skills, we'll have Tolu and Obey really share with you their stories on how they acquired those skills and experiences they needed to get in order to get to where they are today. So with that being said, I hand it over to you guys.
Thank you, Rihanna. So similar to some of the questions we already saw during the icebreaker, like we had anticipated that you all probably are curious about how do you get into SAP? And like as individuals, myself and Obey get that question very often. So we thought to share our personal experiences. So I got into the world of SAP through consulting. And just to share a little bit about my journey leading into consulting, like I had said earlier, like I started off straight out of school. I had offers both from oil and gas and consulting, but I started off in oil and gas. And at some point, just talking to friends in consulting and just hearing more about the experiences, I found out that the hierarchical structure wasn't as tight in consulting. Like you can be in consulting and your first week or second week on the job, you're talking to the CEO of a top company in whatever industry, right? Whereas when you work in a more traditional company, like you going through the ranks. So I found that to be very exciting. And one of the things I learned very, very early in my career in general is that you always want to start early when you're looking for opportunities, and most importantly, that every experience matters, right? So for me, like my oil and gas experience was probably all I was just anchoring on to try and get my foot into consulting, because at the time I was trying to work for Accenture and they had a lot of IT focused projects. So it was a bit of a tough sell bringing in my oil and gas experience, but I still pushed it out there anyways. And eventually when I got a chance to join Accenture, I didn't directly get into a SAP project because many of these large consulting firms, they service multiple products, right? So Accenture does projects in SAP, in Oracle, Microsoft Cloud Solutions, and all of those technologies. So I started off on a project where we were hired to just manage an IT implementation project. And it was a short 6-month project, but I worked with 2 senior people on that project, and just based on my performance on that project, we, at that time, Accenture got this massive SAP project to implement SAP for Dangote Group. And even though I had 0 experience and I wasn't probably one of the consultants they had planned to have on that project, but just having it that the managers I'd worked with in the past really saw, I guess, the potential in me, and like I had impressed them with the work I had done for them, and they pulled me onto that project. And that was how I got into the world of SAP. So I literally had just like 3 days notice. Like I was told on a Friday that on Monday I'll be starting the SAP project, and I didn't know anything about SAP. I did my best to at least read up on everything I could read up online. Luckily for me, Accenture being a big consulting firm, I was paired up with more senior and more experienced consultants in the world of SAP. And everything I had to learn was me just learning on the job. But ultimately, while still learning on the job and having to look very technically proficient in something I almost didn't know a lot about, on the side I was also reading up, and I worked towards getting a certification. So I guess that was how I really found my way into SAP with Accenture in Nigeria. And then when I moved here to Canada, I moved here, I guess at the time, like the easier option was to always come into Canada as a student, though I wanted the master's degree, but I also had the ultimate intention to stay here and get into the corporate world here. So at that point, like I remember school was meant to be in Ottawa, but I landed in Toronto, and for some reason, I just fell in love with Toronto. So the moment I went to Ottawa and I started school, I was just like, okay, my first month of school, I was just aggressively approaching employers. And one of the tips that helped me then was I had a very SAP specific resume. I had a generic consulting resume, and then I had the resume that targeted more on oil and gas and a bit more of my engineering skill set. And depending on what company I'm applying to, just make minor modifications here and there, but like that was how everything went. So I was lucky that I got recruited from campus, and that was how I got into Deloitte. And obviously, I got the chance to also advance further on my SAP skills while at Deloitte. Worked for a number of clients, worked in a different number of SAP projects, and that was how I kept refining my skills. And when I joined Illumiti in 2018, I already had the SAP experience. Illumiti is a lot more focused on SAP as a core solution. And at that point in time, I was approached by a recruiter. So I was basically headhunted in this context. So I just wanted to give that context, as this is one approach of getting into the world of SAP, where I took my experience with the world of oil and gas, got into the world of consulting, which was a bit more generic. And then I guess things aligned and I landed on the SAP project. So I had to learn directly on the job and be a novice and an expert at the same time. And I was able to transition that skill set from working in Nigeria, continuing that same path here in Canada, and ultimately landed me this job with Illumiti. So that's one approach of getting into SAP by being in a consulting firm. So I'll take a break and let Obey share our own experience and how she got into the world of SAP.
Thank you, Tolu. So my experience is a different route. So like I said, I spent my youth in Nigeria, and I sort of I left when you know, the universities had their bit of a extended strike / break / we don't know when we're going to come back. And so I went to the UK and I continued my studies there. When I finished my undergraduate degree, I started looking for a job, you know, that would tide me over till I got the job, which was related to the discipline that I was in at the time. And I got this opportunity as just an end user working in an IT company that had SAP and had their own competency center. So I learned, you know, for me, SAP was really just something that I used to put in some transaction. It was just debits and credits. And I remember pluses and minuses. And I remember telling myself I should have paid more attention in accounting class. You know, so I was that green. But, you know, it was, for me, it wasn't a thing. It was just a tool. So it was easy to take on. You know, you get into a role, you learn what to do, you learn the tools to do that role, and that's how I used SAP. And then within the company, an opportunity came up for an SAP analyst, which I thought was reasonable while I was still waiting for this job, which was sort of property related, even though I have no sense of property and locations. So I applied for the job, and, you know, I was fortunate to get it. And I remember my first issue, I was just given, you know, this is the issue, you go off and you resolve it. So I had to, you know, whatever I'd learned while I was at the company, I had to deal with people in different competencies and, again, different relationships, from being a user to this analyst that's supposed to know how to resolve the problem. So that really set, I think, my mindset, and I still use that till this day. I have the mindset that every problem has a solution. We just have to get there. And I find SAP quite logical in that route. So that was really my exposure to SAP as a user and as a consultant, if you like. So I transitioned from a support analyst to a consultant, where I was supporting. I've worked in SAP competency centers or center of excellences, which is really some organizations which are quite big. They manage their SAP competencies in-house. So they have consultants that instead of working externally, they work on their projects, their implementations, and so forth. So I had a good experience there. And because I was in the company or in different companies, you know, I sort of, you know, like Tolu said, something's happening, we need a body. You go there and you work and you get that experience. And also just working for some of these companies. I mean, I've worked for IT companies, pharmaceutical companies and consultancies in themselves. You get training. So some of it was mandatory, some was, you know, as you like, and some you learned on the job. And I found this really useful. For me, there was a distinction when I was working on projects and when I was working as a support analyst, because for me, projects, you're delivering SAP to a party. You're telling them how it works, or you're showing that you're helping them to make their processes better. There's a lot of analysis and delivery. Whereas support, they've got it. Now they've got problems. They want to know how to do this, or they want to learn something else. So you have to speak to a user that has used SAP for 5 years and knows the company like the back of their hand, and they come to you and say, I want you to do this for me. So you have to almost learn what they know and then beyond that. And that was a good, you know, sort of good, I think, learning skill set that I acquired through my journey. And so I pretty much did that in the UK for the 12 years I was there. And then just, again, just, I guess, circumstance, due to family, I moved to the States, and then from there I moved to Canada. And I was fortunate, again, to have an opportunity. And for me, SAP is, and I think not just SAP, but a lot of IT competencies. Because of the nature of the world we're living in, you don't really physically, I feel there's more opportunity for companies to explore your skills, sometimes before the person. So they want to know, can you do the job? So I think some other industries may have some other layers that you have to bridge. You know, I feel like from an IT perspective, that the interest is getting the job done first, and we'll kind of know you later. So that's been my sort of experience. And that brought me to Illumiti. So before, the company I was working for, before Illumiti was actually a customer of Illumiti, I was working for them as a process analyst with SAP experience. And again, I was fortunate to learn a lot about soft skills, because, you know, a lot of times you think you know something, and then you hit the level and you realize there's some new understanding or new learnings. So I really enjoyed my time at that company, and I enjoyed working with Illumiti as a customer. And again, I was fortunate, an opportunity came up, and I pursued that opportunity, and I was fortunate to get that. And I'm currently with Illumiti and enjoying that journey. Thank you.
Thanks, Abe. And I'm very happy to have both of you here at Illumiti, because you're both awesome. Whenever I hear you guys talking about your stories and your journeys of how you joined the firm and basically how you guys acquired your experiences, it's interesting to note how you both have two very different avenues, but there are still some things that are always the same and always similar. Like, if you're going to be a consultant and enter into a consultant role, especially if you enter in as a junior, you're kind of going to be thrown in there with very limited experience. And it's going to be up to you to be proactive and show the initiative and reach out and get the resources. No one's going to leave you out to hang and dry. The resources are there, but no one's going to read your mind and know that you need them or that you need that assistance unless you ask for it or seek it out. The other thing I noticed from both of your experiences are opportunities are always around the corner, especially within this industry. And through both of you showcasing how your careers have developed, opportunities have popped up. And it really takes you putting in the initiative of deciding whether you want to jump at them or not, or whether you're ready to take that turn in your career to explore something new that may be a little bit out of your depth and completely different from what you're used to. But if that's where you want to go, you got to take that leap of faith, especially if you trust and have confidence in your skills in being able to do so. So hearing from both of your perspectives on how you got into your careers in SAP and in consulting is always a treat, because you can always see the perseverance and the other intangible skills that you need in that role in order to succeed. And speaking of skills, some of the other ones that you guys mentioned that I was going to ask you guys to elaborate a little bit further on are, what are those soft skills that you need as a consultant within these roles?
So for me, at least from my experience, the SAP piece was almost a no. So there's a technical proficiency for sure you need to have, obviously based on what field you are doing in SAP, but clearly in my field, or as a functional consultant, which is what I am, you need to be technically proficient. There's no way around that. If you want an opportunity, you don't have that knowledge, you have to seek out that knowledge. But then I guess there's a question, if I don't have the knowledge, one, how do I make an impression? Or when I get the opportunity, what do I need to flourish? And I think soft skills, for me initially in my career, was very overlooked. As I've progressed, I found it very valuable, and I find it, for me, it sets people apart in terms of their knowledge. SAP, functionally wise, or technical SAP, is, it's very logical. You learn it, you know it. But how do you take information that you have and make it meaningful to a client, make it meaningful to a person, make them understand where you're going or where they want to go? Sometimes there's a saying, I'm not sure if it's really a saying, but there's what is right and what is the right path. So you can be right. I can give you a solution and it's right. But if you don't believe in that solution, if you don't trust that that solution works for you, what value is that knowledge that I have that it's right? So I think sometimes you need to get people on the right path. And now all these skills that help you get there, that help you gain the trust, help you realize your potential, help you deliver, that people or the parties that you're delivering or engaging with are confident that they're in the right hands, I think is all down to your soft skills. And in Tola and I's conversation or our discussion, we touched on how we had opportunities. I've met some people that have started, they might be 5 years in SAP, and some people like 20 years in SAP, but the person with 5 years has gone farther. It's not about years, it's about what you do with it and your preference, because as well, people's vision of what they want to achieve with their role is different. And I think soft skills allows you to sort of find your way in the world of work and delivery and everything that it encompasses. There are quite a few that come to mind. There's creative thinking, which I think you need, logical thinking, not to make assumptions, or at least make informed assumptions. 1 + 1 is 2, and if 1 + 1 is 3, then there's an element missing. That kind of thing. I think you have to rely on data. I think gut is a good thing, but I think data informs, it's a mesh. And I think soft skills, to acquire them, you have to just sort of develop your mindset, understand that it's not just being technical. When I say technical, knowing the system, or learning the system, or going on a course or reading a book, but how can I communicate? How can I collaborate? How can I make sure that I'm working in a team without drowning my ideas? I think those are things that I ascribe to soft skills. And I don't think there's any one way you can acquire them. I think you get that from life, from your everyday competencies in roles that are even not SAP. And what's been interesting to me is some of the knowledge, or sometimes the way I apply things, or the way I think things in my mind, or when I speak to people, I find sometimes they're drawing on things that are not, or reasoning they're not necessarily SAP based. It's just logical. It's something you know, or something you've learned. And I think those are things that set you apart as a person, as a consultant. And also it opens you up to the potential of your future. Because if you're open, I think if you engage I think people see you and opportunities find you, and you recognize those opportunities. And some opportunities are not just SAP. Some are stepping stones to SAP. So sometimes, like some of the jobs I took, even the job I took before Illumiti, some of my SAP skills wasn't attractive to them and others were. And I took that job, or they took me, and it's a two-sided thing, because it was such an interesting company. I like their vision, I like their passion, I like their work ethic. And while I was there, I did grow. My SAP skills grew, but my soft skills in my mind grew so much. So I think to acquire them, you must expand your awareness. Always review what you're doing. Think about where you want to go to. Some people about the destination, some people about the journey. But I think both are as important. Identify where you're going to, but don't forget to look back at the lessons you learn along the way. So I think you need to look at reviews, rely on feedback, and there's so much informational tools out there, especially in this time of COVID. And again, like I said, strategically identify opportunities. And that's my sort of take on how you could acquire some soft skills to get you going in today's world. Thank you.
Yeah. And just to add a bit to that, I think one of the bigger things I still see, especially with soft skills, is that a lot of us tend to discredit our experience, right? So Obey said a lot about identifying your journey, looking through your journey. Every experience you have along the way really counts. Like, I've met people in some cases tell me, oh, I don't have any managerial experience. And I remember a friend that spent about 2 years in Nigeria just managing a mom's shop, for instance, right? To us, maybe in the Nigerian workforce, that might not count as much as experience, but out here it does, right? Because if you're managing a store for 2 months, that's a lot of experience in supply chain. Like, you've learned how to manage inventory, you've learned how to gauge the demand, you've gained some marketing skills along the way, right? So there's a lot of skills that we gain on a day-to-day basis that a lot of people shy away from. But if you just constantly think about your journey and think about the things that you learned along the way, don't be the one to discredit your experience, right? Because sometimes some job postings get a big bogus, right? They say, oh, 20 years of managerial experience, 15 years of this, right? But through your journey, starting from when you were in university, starting from all the associations that you volunteered in, starting from all the class assignment groups that you led, starting from all the presentations you did while you're in college, every one of those experience counts along the way. So I just always like to remind people that don't be the one to discredit your experience. Think deeply about the things you've done along the way and realize that those are valuable skills that the right employer will see and appreciate. And just to wrap up a bit of the conversation, I'll touch on the technical skills and how you can acquire them. So myself and Obey have shared that for the most part, we had to learn on the job based on the opportunities that we had, Obey in the industry, myself in the consulting space. But again, a lot of people, it's important to know that within the world of SAP consulting, there are people that we refer to as technical consultants, and there are people that are referred to as functional consultants. Technical consultants deal more with the back-end stuff. They're savvy with programming. If you're that kind of person, that might lean more towards technical. The role is not as customer facing, but then there's the functional side of things, which is what I do, and that's what Obey does as well, where we are the ones talking to the customers every day. We're interacting with them, dealing with their questions firsthand, being curious enough, understanding how things work there. So there are those core parts within the world of SAP. And then there are also the other supporting functions, right? So like, you don't need SAP skills to manage your SAP project, right? You just need to know well enough. So there's the project delivery side of things. And then there's also a career path in like support. So if you're working for a company where SAP is the main product being used there, or the platform being used, there are roles within such organizations for you to learn system from a user point of view and help people as they have issues. So I just thought to mention that bit when it comes to like the technical skills that are needed in the world of SAP. When it comes to training, there are a lot of training programs out there. There are a few degree programs actually in some of the colleges in Toronto that are focused on SAP is a kind of enterprise resource planning software. So those programs are packaged as enterprise resource planning focused programs. So they don't just limit you to SAP, they teach you Oracle and some of the other ERP softwares we have out there. So that could be a good way to get your feet into the world of SAP or ERP at large. And then we've talked about the different workplace opportunities, shadowing someone who is more experienced. And there's some, back in the days, I used to know that there's some programs you could actually sign up for, like crash courses, where they pair you up with someone and they teach you how to get into the system. And I think those are some of the ways that are available out there for each one of us that are interested in getting into SAP to gain the technical skills that you need to be a successful SAP consultant.
Great.
Those are great to know, Tolu. I'm being very mindful of the time, so I want to make sure that we transition over to Francis. Francis, you can begin covering, I think, what everyone's been hoping to get a little bit more insight into, especially in the Canadian market. So focusing on basically preparing yourself for success in the Canadian market. So resumes, CVs, job boards, LinkedIn, everything they need to know to properly prepare themselves before they before they apply to that job here.
Exactly. So hopefully I can help you in a little way. All right, so what I want to go through is the difference between a resume versus a CV, because there is actually a difference, and in Canada and the United States, we tend to use resumes. A couple of tips and tricks are really important from a recruiting standpoint, because you don't realize what happens on the back end. The cover letter, should I add it? Shouldn't I add it? The difference between recruiters internally, recruiters externally, the headhunters that Tolu actually mentioned, and other types of agencies. Job boards, I'll touch on job boards, LinkedIn, and then the last thing is networking, using your network. That's really important. So all of these components are pieces to helping you get a role. So let's talk first of all about the difference between a resume versus a CV. So if we talk about what we use today in Canada, we tend to use a resume. The resume versus a CV. CVs are used only really in academia, as well as, let's say, in the scientific realm. The CV tends to, when a company asks you for a CV, that's a very detailed description of your whole career, including white papers, all of your education, and it could be pages and pages long. A resume is something vastly different. It really should be concise. It's 1 or 2 pages in length, 3 pages if you have 10 or plus years of experience. It outlines your professional experience and skills, but the recent ones, the last 10 years. Anything more than that, don't put on your resume. And it should be tailored strictly relevant to the job that you're applying for. Tolu mentioned this very clearly, that he had 3 different types of resumes when he was applying for different industries and different types of roles. This is absolutely critical. And as I said, it is what we use here in Canada and the United States. Think of a resume as your sales tool. You are selling yourself and you're getting into the door. You're trying to get that interview. So you don't have to worry about all those other components. You know, let's say you've got a master's, a PhD, you've got these certifications, etc. Don't worry about all of that stuff. You don't need all of that stuff. Get your foot in the door and stick to the information that the employer wants you to fill. So let's talk a little bit more about the cover letter. What about the cover letter? Do you or don't you add a cover letter? So the jury is out on this here in Canada. 50% of recruiters say add a cover letter, 50% say don't add a cover letter. But I'm going to actually push for a cover letter, and I'll tell you why. When we have 150, 200 resumes come in, each and every single resume pretty much looks the same. It's extremely difficult for us to identify what is different between you and someone else. Your cover letter can help distinguish yourself from someone else. It provides a little bit more information in terms of who you are, your uniqueness. You sell yourself a little bit more. And so what you really want to do is make sure you do that. By the way, Rihanna, I just realized you put cover letter here in terms of instead of CV, but so that's okay. So if you can go to the next slide.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I suddenly realized as I was in it, I'm thinking, oh, just talk to it. Okay, so let's go back to the resume in terms of what you should not include. Many people coming into Canada will put a lot of information into their resume because they're thinking of a CV, age, social insurance number, a photograph, your marital status, your gender, how many children you have, maybe a political affiliation, your immigration status, whether you're disabled, and a detailed reference list. Do not include any of that. And the reasoning for this is that decisions on hiring should be based on merit. We've worked really hard here in Canada to try and move away from a hiring based on all sorts of things like this. And I'll give you an example. If you wrote on your resume that you have 4 children, and there's someone else who hasn't identified that they have 4 children, and I know that the role is really, really tough. It's hours long. The manager may subconsciously think or unconsciously think, I've got 2 great candidates, but one's not married and the other one has 4 kids. I think I may go with the one who's not married because he may have more time or she may have more time. So that's one of the reasons why do not put that information on the resume. It is not relevant to the role. And anyway, a manager making a decision on hiring based on any of that is a violation of your human rights under the Human Rights Code here in Canada. It's not legal. So what we're trying to tell you is it doesn't matter. That information is irrelevant in the resume. So let's go to the next slide. So what do you put on your resume? So very, very important is that hiring managers and recruiters, as I said, have a number of resumes come in. So they spend approximately 10 to 30 seconds browsing your resume. And this actually comes from a number of studies done in human resources. So what they're doing is they're reading in a zigzag fashion, and they look keyword searching, and they're looking for relevance. So remember the job description, and they're looking to see how your resume ties in with their job description. So when you're putting your resume together, look at everything they're looking for. Totally made a very good point though. Don't worry about things saying, oh, you need 15 years experience. You must have a master's degree. They put that in the job description, but I'll tell you right now, it's the last thing we think about when we're actually doing hiring. It's not a requirement, generally speaking. That's usually got to do with salary tables and what we're looking for from a salary perspective. So align your resume to job description as much as possible and highlight this on your resume. Don't get into nitty-gritty in your resume. Try no long detailed sentences, just bullet point things to the point. The font should be approximately anywhere from 10 to 12, and use things like Helvetica and Verdana when you're putting your resume together because it's very easy to read. So don't try and use very unusual fonts, etc. It's very difficult, and the recruiter or manager may have 15 other resumes and decide not to continue with the resume because it's too difficult to read. So in terms of length, make sure if you've got 10 plus years of experience, stick to 2.5 to 3 pages. If you're a new grad, 1 page, and anything under 10 years, 2 pages at the most. From an education perspective, only stick to what's relevant. As I said, if you've got lots of affiliations, etc., accreditations, you may have a PhD, it's not relevant to that particular role. So just put down what is relevant. And if you are at least 5 years out of university or college, don't put your education right at the top. You'll put that at the end of your resume, but if you're right out of university, it is actually important to put it right there. You can put your GPA, they call it GPA, or, you know, I've got A's or whatever, I've got, you know, honors or what have you. You can put that on, but again, it's not that relevant. E&Y as well has announced that they are not hiring consultants based on their university degrees anymore. So understand that they're actually looking for the soft skills that Obehi and Tolu mentioned. They're looking for those skills and how you think on your feet, as opposed to your actual education. Your education can sometimes get you in the door, but it doesn't mean to say you've got the job. Use Canadian terms when dealing with your experience. And what do I mean by that? Is college, in the United States they use college versus university. Here we use university. College can mean a technical college, or you may have received a diploma. So it can be confusing on a resume, as well as the term senior executive. Just another example, many companies may have a lot of levels within a role. In Canada, a senior executive truly means that you're a senior executive and you're most probably in the 10 to 15 percentile in terms of compensation from a Canadian perspective. So you're in the 300, 400,000 range. And so that may immediately take you out of the role. So when you're putting what your title was, try and align your title to what you see in the Canadian market. And tense, very important. We see it a lot on resumes. People make mistakes where they put the incorrect tense. They'll say present, I'm presently doing this. So I am doing this, where really it is in the past. So make sure you're always looking for that the grammar is correct, the tense is correct, and the spelling is correct. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of the cover letter, I kind of started talking about that because of the mistake on the slide, and I apologize for that. Let me explain a little bit. I'm going to give you a very personal story as to why I believe a cover letter is important. So I had a position open for an HR specialist 3 years ago, and I wanted to give everyone who applied for my role I wanted to look at every resume. There were over 150 resumes in just 48 hours, and the resumes all look the same. So what did I do? I decided I'm going to look at those who applied and provided me a cover letter. And this gave me a lot of information, because what I found is some individuals provided me with information that wasn't relevant to the role. They clearly had just kind of thrown a cover letter that they used with other positions. So when you're putting a cover letter together, remember, don't just use the same old tired cover letter. But what I found is some individuals really tied what I was looking for in the role to their experience. So they put a little bit of a plan together. They said, this is your role and this is what I've done. Made a huge difference. And they portrayed a little bit about themselves in there as well. They sounded interesting. And so as a result, the person I hired, Maria, who's my HR manager today, I hired her because of her cover letter, not necessarily her resume, because her resume was very similar to everyone else's. So remember, a cover letter can provide some uniqueness, as well as it's a great opportunity to align your experience with the experience that the company is looking for. And it should be short and succinct. Next slide. All right. I think I've really gone through this with you. The only other thing I wanted to make sure that you understand with the cover letter is make it personal. And we mentioned this a little bit about tie it to the company itself. So show that you've actually done some homework on the company. You've looked at the values. You may have gone to Glassdoor and found out something about the CEO. And also use actual statistics. Like if you can prove that you've done something, you say something like, I reduced cost by a certain percentage in 2017 when implementing whatever it is. So very important. Also on the cover letter is make sure you have your contact information there as well, yet again. I see a question. Let me stop because there is a question about certification in landing a job. It depends on what you're actually doing. I think it really does depend. So sometimes there may be a certification that is needed. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm an HR person with 20 years of HR, and I don't have my HR certification. I started in HR, and quite frankly, it wouldn't make sense for me to do my HR certification now because my years of experience are far more important than that certification. However, if you're just starting out, that certification may be important. So it really does depend on the role that you're applying for. All right. I'll answer other questions. So, okay, so how do you prep? Now that I've told you a little bit about the resume and what to do and the cover letter. So I'm a huge proponent of the cover letter because like everyone else, I zigzag read and I just don't have time for every resume that comes through. So how do you go about looking for a role? Well, you can use recruiters, headhunters, as well as agencies, but I want to give you a word of caution where recruiters are concerned. So remember, recruiters are retained by companies to source potential candidates. So those particular companies don't have time to source candidates and so have gone to an agency. That recruiter only gets paid and does not get it. Most recruiters are also on our contingency. So what will happen is they only get paid when they fill that role. So the recruiters are not working for you. They work for the company who has retained them to fill that position. The recruiter will only remember you as long as they have that position. And it's not because they don't want to. I'm not trying to be hard. It's that they speak to so many people and look at so many resumes that really what you need to do is remember that. So don't dismiss using a headhunter, and when a headhunter reaches out to you, absolutely use them. But don't anticipate that the next role that opens up on their website they have posted that they would naturally call you, because they may genuinely just not have remembered. So it's okay, phone them again and say, hey, I see another position, I'd like to apply for it. If a recruiting firm asks you to pay for their services, run, because it's illegal in Canada. Because think about it, I'm not going to pay 30% of someone's base salary to a recruiter who comes to me and says, hey, I have a fantastic individual and I want to sell this person to you. They don't even know whether I have the position open or whether I may even have that resume on file. There are individuals who are genuinely out there or genuinely help you in terms of helping you with it from a marketing standpoint, from resume writing, interviewing techniques, job applications, helping you with your LinkedIn profile, coaching you and making, keeping you keeping you feeling positive about the workplace. That is slightly different. And that is legal, but be very careful. They shouldn't be trying to say that they're going to sell your services and you have to pay for that. There are as well temporary agencies, such as some of them I've listed here, Robert Half, Adecco, Randstad. Actually, my first job, I kind of got in one of those companies through an old network. And that's how I got into recruiting. So don't dismiss temporary agencies. Often temporary agencies have a relationship with a client or number of clients, and there's an actual contract that they have that if there are temporary positions that need to be filled, that agency will help and fill, and that they pay sort of this fee in a generalized fee. These agencies tend to also, if you get a great relationship with them, they tend to also help you get a foot in the door somewhere else. They'll help you also look for other jobs, maybe full-time jobs. So don't dismiss temporary agencies in your effort to find a role. So remember, using headhunters and recruiting firms is one method in terms of your in terms of helping you find a job. So let's go to the internal recruiter, which Tolu and Obehi, who reached out to the two of you? Was it someone internal, or was it an external recruiter for Illumiti?
It was internal for me.
Exactly. So let's go to the next slide.
This internal to me.
So the internal recruiter, this is who you actually need to get to know, and this is who you need to keep in touch with, etc. So most companies find it beneficial to have their own recruiting staff. And recruiters are highly specialized individuals that were originally many moons ago under the HR banner. But really what's happened is they've become so specialized that they've moved out of HR, and they usually are aligned with the business. And so they often report into the business because they need to understand the culture, they need to understand the roles that they're filling. They actually are very aligned with the employees internally. A lot of employees feel comfortable with recruiters, and so do the managers. So quite often people reach out to HR thinking HR oversees all of recruiting. We really don't. We oversee the other specialties within the company from an employee engagement. Recruiters are there to help the organization find candidates that are great fits. So they really understand, as I said, they really understand fit, they really understand the roles that they're filling, and they understand the managers who are recruiting. And they are looking really for an 80% fit to the job description that they put out there. Recruiters are also extremely visible on LinkedIn, on their websites, because they need to be. Think of it, they're almost like sales individuals. So they want you to reach out to them. So this is really what you want to do. They belong to a lot of these recruiting websites, as well as they also have access to something called a LinkedIn Recruiter Premium, where they can see the back end side of LinkedIn in terms of understanding who is really looking for a job and who isn't. They also use something called applicant tracking systems or recruiting systems, and this helps them kind of weed out those individuals that may not necessarily be the right person for the role. So what do I mean by that? We punch in information. So remember the job description, I said I'm looking for an 80% fit. They look for certain words that are highly important that tie your resume to their job. And they'll actually write in the system saying that there has to be an 80% fit between the resume that's coming in and my job description. So if you hit 79% in terms of fit for that job, that recruiter will never see the resume. It'll actually go into, and you may automatically get, thank you for applying for this job. We're looking at other candidates. It's actually a form letter that is spat out by the actual system itself. Now, you may honestly have the experience for that role, but you have not done your due diligence in tying what you have done to that job description. So take time and do that. All right. And also, not all open positions are posted on company career sites. So this is one of the reasons why you need to get to know these recruiters, see who's recruiting out there, is because they may be looking at internal candidates, but they're also reviewing old resumes. So there may be someone who they interviewed in the past who may not have been a fit, but they've kept in contact with them. And so they're actually reaching out to see whether those individuals are available to work. Consider contracting in the beginning. It actually can be very beneficial from a monetary perspective. Some people only want to contract, but often contracting leads to full-time roles. We have many individuals who were originally contractors who became full-time employees. And also, as I said to you, we don't post everything because of the cost. There is a huge cost to posting positions externally. So we make a decision where we're going to post them based on all of that. And there could be other reasons. So always check the internal websites, but also check and see what those recruiters are doing and keep in touch with them. Always keep in touch with them. They are your friends, believe me. I should mention before we go to the next slide, is recruiters internally are often compensated the same as external recruiters, in that they get a higher percentage bonus based on the number of positions they fill internally and how long employees stay. So this is why it's really important they are looking for fit, because they want you to stay, because at the end of the day, it's one of the areas that their management will look at in terms of providing their bonuses, etc. Okay, next slide. Job boards. So obviously we post our positions externally, but there are so many job boards out there. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. So you may not necessarily see the role that you want on a particular job, on one particular job board. So you need to actually make sure that you're looking at all those job boards out there. There are those specialty job boards, like let's say if you're in green technology, IT, or non-for-profit, there are specific job boards around that, and also professional associations and affiliations. But it takes time for companies to post on these various job boards. So they may only focus on certain job boards. The main ones that Torontonians seem to use a lot is Indeed, Glassdoor, and Simply Hired. I'll talk about LinkedIn later on. Indeed is a job board that companies will have to pay in order to post a role, but Indeed does something else that's quite interesting, is that they also have a spider mechanism in their system where they literally troll companies like ourselves and other large companies, and they'll do what they call scraping. So they scrape our career website and post our positions on their website, which is great for us. But what it does sometimes mean, as you, the job seeker, that role may be old. So use Indeed, but go onto the career website and see whether that role is still relevant. It may or may not be. Glassdoor provides a lot more information for you in terms of the company itself, how the company is doing, how other employees have perceived it, the company. It provides you with information about the interview, etc. Don't look at all the information as being completely 100% correct, but it is another item, it's another board that you can use. Again, it's actually very expensive for companies to use. So I'll be very honest, we don't use it. We really use LinkedIn and our own internal job board. Simply Hired is another one. They also use scraping like Indeed does, as well as payment. So as you can see, job boards, there's so many of them, but it doesn't necessarily mean each company is going to use that. So that's why you really want to use the company websites. And again, it's another tool in your toolbox, but so many companies are going on LinkedIn. So you want to go into LinkedIn right now. So Rihanna, can you go to the next slide? So I would say LinkedIn is the most powerful tool for recruiting and networking. And when I say recruiting, I mean passive networking and passive recruiting. In the old days, when I first started recruiting, we used to have to hit that phone. We would headhunt. We'd try and get individuals to sell us names in order to, and we'd phone in and say, hey, listen, we may have this job, etc. But now with the advent of LinkedIn, recruiters can passively look and see a myriad of potential candidates out there. In Canada, over 45% of Canadians are active on LinkedIn. And when I say active, it means that they go onto LinkedIn at least once a week. We are one of the largest, so from a global perspective, Canadians use LinkedIn more than many other countries in the world. And I'm talking about the West, like the United States, etc. We actually use it more than the US does. This is where you can really sell yourself and really where you can promote yourself. So when I was talking to you about the resume, keeping your resume short and sweet, this is where you can put all that other information. If you have published something, if you do have a website, if you have, if you are a blogger, if you have a number of different degrees, this is a great way, and this is a great place to put all that information. You can go into detail. You can even tie your resume so that other people can pull it down. Be very positive and warm on LinkedIn. We can tell, recruiters can tell when someone is desperate. So don't be desperate, but be positive, be warm. Have a great picture of yourself out there, and be okay using slogans like hashtag open to work. If you notice, you go onto LinkedIn right now and you'll see many individual. It's got a little green line around it and says hashtag open to work or seeking new opportunities. Recruiters love it because you're making their job much easier when they're looking to fill their positions. LinkedIn has great tips and tricks on how to put a great profile together. And I also found that themuse.com gives you some fabulous information on what looks good on LinkedIn. I'm also going to really put forward that get involved in LinkedIn. What I mean by get involved, show what your interests are on LinkedIn, but also blog if you can, get involved in some of the other items and go into LinkedIn at least twice a day and read items on LinkedIn, like things on LinkedIn. Why that's important is what happens is, remember, recruiters are looking. What happens is there is something on the back end of LinkedIn, which when recruiters punch in the information that they're looking for, they're starting to look, they use it as a database. And because you're active on LinkedIn, your name is one of the names that comes up right at the top. If you're not active on LinkedIn, what happens is you won't come as one of the top individuals. So make sure you do that. Put your information out there. You will start to get noticed on LinkedIn, so do that, okay? Next one I think is about networking. Yes, okay, so I'm going to put a push here for networking about, now that was passive networking, this is active networking. So what do I mean by active networking? So I'm going to give you a little story again, because I do like stories. And this is very true. My brother-in-law lost his job. This is a couple of years ago. And his, my sister was speaking to the next door neighbor, and she said, oh, you know, Mark has lost his job, unfortunately. And so their next door neighbor went to her husband and said, oh, you know, Mark lost his job. And the neighbor said, I had no idea. You know, this position has come up. I think Mark would be great for it. So promptly walked across, spoke to my brother-in-law, got his resume, got in front, and lo and behold, my brother-in-law became the CFO of that organization. So what I'm trying to tell you there is, don't be afraid of telling people when you meet someone and they say, hi, how are you? So what do? Don't be embarrassed by saying, well, actually, I'm looking for a job right now. So think of who are your friends? Who do you know? Who is in your circle of influence? Don't discount those individuals you know, your friends, their friends, etc. Put it out there that you are looking for a job. There's no shame in that. And believe me, it does work. In fact, the majority of roles in Canada are actually filled because of networking in that way. So remember your they always tell you about the elevator pitch. So the elevator pitch is when you meet someone for the first time, and if you are looking for a job and they say, so what do? And you say, well, actually, I'm looking for a job. And these are the items that this is what I actually do. Think of giving them the 2-minute elevator pitch, because it's your opportunity to sell, and that individual may know someone who is looking. So don't be embarrassed when you meet someone. Really honestly use that. As I said, I gave the example of myself when I came back from Japan. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I reached out to someone who I had worked with in the past, and they were the ones who referred me to that first job that I had here in Canada, working for a temporary agency as a recruiter. So that's why I say networks can occur. I applied for a lot of jobs, but that's ultimately the role that actually came about is because of someone I knew. So I hope that this helps you a little bit in terms of what to use, both passive, in terms of passive recruiting, the recruiting techniques, active networking, passive networking, how to look for jobs, etc. And I know you have some questions. I saw some questions here. So let me see. Let me see if I can answer them.
Yeah. let's go into.
Oh, I see. So you said, do we have entrants and job seekers go past the request for security clearances for jobs? So are you talking about a background check or an actual security check, a police check between, you know, sometimes I've had to go through it where they have to do a background check and they are checking all the places that you've lived in the past, that police security check you have to get outside. Is that what you mean? So let me answer both. If you have to do a security, if the company is interested in hiring you, they will more than likely, you shouldn't have to pay for that. They will ask you to fill that out and to take part. We have to sometimes do it. Some of our clients require it, especially if they're, you know, especially in the mining industry, they want you to do a background check. But we only do that after an offer has been made. So, and we would actually pay for that. As the hirer, we actually pay for that as part of our process.